mocking laughter echoed from our grand marble porch as I dragged my suitcase through the freezing rain. My own father branded me a worthless failure, and my sister filmed my tearful exile. A decade later, I bought that very mansion in cash and personally handed them their eviction notice. To understand the sheer magnitude of my family's downfall, you first have to understand the Harrington legacy. We lived in Oak Creek, an aggressively wealthy suburb where your worth was determined by the square footage of your estate and the brand of the car in your driveway. Our home, situated at 4100 Crestview Drive, was the crown jewel of the neighborhood. It was a sprawling 8-bedroom colonial mansion with a wraparound driveway, a manicured hedge maze, and a grand foyer, boasting a chandelier that my mother loved to remind guests was imported directly from a 19th-century chateau in Lyon. My father, Richard Harrington, was the CEO of Harrington Capital. To the outside world, he was a financial titan, a brilliant mind who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. To me, he was a dictator in a tailored Italian suit. My mother, Evelyn, was his perfect counterpart, a woman whose entire existence revolved around country club gossip, charity galas, and maintaining the flawless illusion of our family's superiority. Then there was my older sister, Vanessa, the golden child. Vanessa never stepped out of line. She majored in art history because it sounded prestigious, wore exactly what her mother picked out for her, and eagerly dated the sons of my father's business associates. She was being groomed for a lucrative marriage, and she played the part flawlessly. I, on the other hand, was the constant disappointment. I didn't care about the country club. I hated the stiff, suffocating gala dinners. I was a software engineering major who spent my weekends writing code and dreaming of building my own tech startup. To Richard and Evelyn, my ambition was not just confusing, it was embarrassing. The breaking point arrived a week before my 24th birthday. It was a brisk Friday evening in November, and my mother had organized a formal family dinner. The dining room table was set with the fine china, the air thick with the scent of roasted duck, and the heavy tension that always preceded one of my father's business propositions. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and leveled a cold stare at me. "Chloe," he began, his voice carrying the deceptive calmness of a judge delivering a sentence. "As you know, the market has been volatile lately. Harrington Capital is expanding its commercial real estate portfolio, and I require a temporary injection of liquid capital to bypass some tedious banking regulations. I have drafted the paperwork for you to sign over the trust fund your grandfather left you." I froze. When my grandfather passed away, he had left both Vanessa and me a trust of $500,000, accessible when we turned 23. It was the only money I had that wasn't tied to my father's strict conditions. "I can't do that, Dad," I said quietly, setting down my fork. My father's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I am not asking for your permission, Chloe. I'm informing you of a familial obligation. Vanessa has already signed hers over." I glanced at Vanessa. She was swirling her wine glass, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. "It's called loyalty, Chloe. Not that you'd understand," she sneered. "I can't sign it over," I repeated, my heart hammering against my ribs, "because the money is gone. I withdrew it 3 months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Even my mother dropped her fork, the silver clattering loudly against the china plate. "Gone?" my father whispered, his face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. "What do you mean, gone? What have you done?" "I invested it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My college roommate David and I founded a supply chain logistics software company. We needed seed money for server space, licensing, and hiring 2 junior developers. It's a solid business model, Dad. We're already beta testing with you through $500,000 away on a pathetic computer project." My father roared, slamming his hands on the mahogany table so hard the crystal water glasses tipped over. Water spilled across the antique lace tablecloth, but no one moved to clean it. It's not a project, it's a company. Aegis Logistics, I defended, standing up from my chair. It's my future. Granddad left that money for us to build our lives. That's what I'm doing. Your life is what I dictate it is. He screamed, stepping toward me. The mask of the refined gentleman had completely slipped, revealing the terrifying, desperate man underneath. You arrogant, ungrateful little parasite. I am offering you the chance to support the family that put clothes on your back, and you steal from me to play pretend with your little nerd friends. I didn't steal anything. It was my money. Nothing is yours, my mother shrieked, finally breaking her silence. She looked at me with an expression of pure disgust. You have ruined this dinner. You have ruined everything. We had an arrangement with the Croft family. Preston Croft was going to propose to you next month, tying our firms together. Now what are we supposed to tell them? That our daughter is a delusional brat who threw away her dowry? I stared at them, horrified. You were going to sell me to Preston Croft. He's a misogynistic creep. He is worth $80 million. My father bellowed. The argument spiraled into pure chaos. The more I defended my independence, the more vicious they became. Finally, my father pointed a trembling finger at the front door. Get out. Dad, be reasonable. I said, get out. He roared, his face purple with rage. If you want to be a brilliant entrepreneur so badly, you can do it without the Harrington name, without my roof over your head, and without my money. Pack your bags. You have 15 minutes. I looked at my mother, hoping for a shred of maternal instinct. She just turned her back to me and began dabbing at the spilled water with her napkin. I looked at Vanessa. She had pulled out her phone and was texting someone, completely unfazed. I ran upstairs, my vision blurred with tears, and threw whatever clothes I could fit into a single large suitcase. I grabbed my laptop, my external hard drives, and my passport. When I came back downstairs, the front door was already open. Outside, a freezing, torrential November rain was coming down in sheets. My father stood by the door, arms crossed, as I walked past him, my suitcase thumping awkwardly down the carpeted stairs. Vanessa leaned against the banister. She had her phone raised, the camera lens pointed squarely at me. Make sure you get my good side, Vay, I choked out, trying to maintain a shred of dignity. Vanessa actually laughed, a high, mocking sound that echoed in the grand foyer. Have fun living in a cardboard box, Chloe. Don't call us when you go bankrupt. You are no longer a Harrington, my father said coldly, stepping forward to literally shove me out onto the porch. You are dead to us. He slammed the heavy oak door in my face. The deadbolt clicked. I stood on the grand marble porch of 4100 Crestview Drive, shivering in my thin trench coat. I could hear them inside. They were actually laughing. The muffled sound of my father pouring himself a drink, my mother complaining about the rug, Vanessa giggling at whatever she had just posted to her private story. I dragged my suitcase down the long, winding driveway in the freezing rain, every step feeling like a heavy blow to my chest. But amidst the heartbreak and the cold, a tiny, blazing ember of absolute fury ignited in my stomach. I promised myself right then and there I would never let them see me break, and one day I would make them choke on their laughter. The first 3 years after being disowned were a living nightmare. I moved into a moldy, cramped studio apartment on the industrial south side of the city. The radiator hissed all night, the window barely locked, and the entire hallway smelled distinctly of boiled cabbage and despair. I poured every waking second into Aegis Logistics. David and I lived on cheap, instant ramen, black coffee, and sheer stubborn willpower. There were months when we couldn't afford to pay ourselves. Times when we had to choose between keeping the server lights on or paying our apartment rent. During those dark nights when I was hunched over my laptop at 3 a.m., exhausted and shivering, the memory of my family's laughter echoing in the foyer was the only thing that kept me awake. I heard nothing from my parents. I was effectively erased from the Harrington family history. The only updates I received came from the few mutual acquaintances I still had on social media, or from Vanessa's aggressively public Instagram page. 2 years after I was kicked out, Vanessa married Preston Croft. The wedding was a sickeningly opulent affair featured in local luxury magazines. There were $200,000 floral arrangements, a private performance by a famous pop star, and my mother beaming in a custom couture gown. I sat on my lumpy thrift store mattress eating a $2 slice of pizza, staring at a photo of my father walking Vanessa down the aisle. He looked so proud, so victorious. But behind the scenes, the foundation of the Harrington Empire was rotting. The turning point for me arrived in year 4. Aegis Logistics had slowly built a reputation for having the most ruthless, efficient, and unbreakable supply chain algorithm in the Midwest. We started picking up mid-level contracts, and then a miracle happened. A massive Fortune 500 retail giant called Omnicorp experienced a catastrophic logistical failure during the holiday season. Desperate, they licensed our software on a trial basis. Our algorithm saved them over $40 million in a single quarter. 6 months later, Omnicorp didn't just want to renew our contract, they wanted to buy us out entirely. The day David and I sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room and signed the acquisition paperwork, I felt entirely numb. The buyout was for $120 million. My share, after taxes and paying out our small team, left me with a staggering personal net worth of over $45 million. I was 28 years old. I had won. I moved out of my dingy studio and bought a beautiful, secure penthouse downtown. I hired a brilliant wealth manager named Alex Pendleton. I bought a new wardrobe, but I didn't flaunt it. I kept my social media private, my name off the flashy press releases whenever possible, and lived quietly. I was waiting, because right around the time my life was skyrocketing, my father's life was entering a terrifying freefall. It started as a trickle of rumors in the financial sector. Harrington Capital was missing margins. Then came the whispers of over-leveraged commercial real estate investments. My father, in his arrogance, had bet heavily on a series of luxury retail developments right before a massive shift toward e-commerce gutted the market. Then the trickle turned into a tsunami. I woke up one Tuesday morning, poured myself a cup of artisanal coffee, and opened my tablet to read the financial news. There, on the front page of the digital Wall Street Journal, was a headline that made my breath catch. SEC launches investigation into Harrington Capital amid allegations of fraudulent accounting. I sat at my kitchen island reading the article with wide eyes. My father hadn't just made bad investments. To cover up his massive losses and maintain his wealthy lifestyle, he had been illegally shifting client funds. The temporary liquidity issue he had tried to steal my grandfather's trust fund to fix all those years ago was actually the beginning of a massive, desperately concealed financial sinkhole. The dominoes fell with brutal, spectacular speed. Within weeks, Harrington Capital's assets were frozen. Clients filed class action lawsuits. The state revoked his trading licenses. The media tore the family apart, exposing the lavish, debt-fueled lifestyle they had been living. And Vanessa? Her perfect marriage to Preston Croft shattered the moment the money dried up. The Croft family, terrified of the PR nightmare and the SEC investigations, initiated a brutal, swift divorce because Vanessa had signed an ironclad prenuptial agreement. Cocky in the belief that her family was just as rich as his, she walked away with almost nothing. I watched it all unfold from the quiet sanctuary of my penthouse. I felt a complex knot of emotions, pity, sorrow, but overwhelmingly a cold, dark satisfaction. One afternoon I called my wealth manager Alex into my home office. "Alex," I said, sliding a manila folder across the desk, "I need you to set up a blind trust. Completely anonymous. A shell LLC registered out of state. Untraceable to my name." Alex raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses. "Of course, Chloe. What are we acquiring?" "A property," I said softly, tapping the folder. The Harrington estate at 4100 Crestview Drive. Not that for nowhere be. Alex opened the folder and scanned the documents I had printed out. He looked up, his expression professional but knowing. This property is heavily mortgaged, Chloe. Given Richard Harrington's current legal predicament, the bank is preparing to initiate foreclosure proceedings. It will likely go to a private luxury auction within the next 90 days. I know, I said, leaning back in my chair, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. When it hits the auction block, I want you to buy it. Pay whatever it takes. Outbid everyone. Cash offer. They will be allowed to remain in the home during the foreclosure and transition period until the new owner takes possession, Alex warned. It could get messy. Let them stay. I smiled, a sharp, humorless thing. Let them pack their bags slowly. Let them wonder who the mysterious billionaire is that just bought their ancestral home out from under them. And when the sale closes, Alex asked, making a note on his legal pad. When the sale closes, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper as the memory of the freezing rain hit my mind. You let me deliver the eviction notice. The downfall of Richard Harrington was not a quiet, dignified affair. It was a loud, messy, and public execution. Over the next 2 months, I watched my father's empire crumble from the comfort of my penthouse, sipping green tea while the morning news anchors dissected his failure. The SEC had frozen everything. My father's high-powered defense attorney, a ruthless bulldog of a lawyer named Robert Kessler, had formally dropped him as a client due to unpaid legal fees. The irony was delicious. The man who had valued capital above his own flesh and blood was now entirely bankrupt, his assets seized, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale on evening broadcasts. The bank finally initiated the foreclosure on 4100 Crestview Drive. Alex Pendleton, my wealth manager, executed our plan flawlessly. He established a shell corporation in Delaware Crestview Holdings, LLC, and registered a sterile, untraceable corporate email. When the house went up for a private luxury auction, it was a bloodbath. Local developers, including a notoriously aggressive real estate mogul named Jonathan Creek, tried to lowball the bank, assuming the Harrington scandal had tainted the property's value. They didn't stand a chance. Every time Jonathan Creek placed a bid, Alex, acting as the proxy for Crestview Holdings, immediately countered with a cash offer $100,000 higher. We didn't just win the auction, we smothered the competition. The final sale price was $8.5 million a steal for the property, but a devastating final nail in the coffin for my parents' delusions. Despite the sale, the Harrington family refused to face reality. Alex informed me that they were acting like squatters wrapped in cashmere when the bank served them with the standard 30-day notice to vacate the premises. My father apparently tore it up in front of the delivery processor. They genuinely believed that whoever owned Crestview Holdings was a foreign investor who would simply allow them to rent the property back to save face. They thought their social standing, though battered, still afforded them privileges. They were wrong. When the 30 days expired, I didn't send another letter. I didn't send the warning. I sent Alex to file an immediate writ of possession with the county clerk. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and bitterly cold, fittingly similar to the night I had been thrown out when the eviction was scheduled to take place. I dressed with meticulous care. I didn't wear a flashy designer gown or anything covered in logos. That was Evelyn's style. Instead, I wore a tailored charcoal gray wool coat, a simple black turtleneck, and my favorite pair of leather boots. I looked like what I was, a woman who had built her own empire from the ground up. I drove myself to Oak Creek. I didn't hire a chauffeur. I wanted my hands on the steering wheel. As I turned onto Crestview Drive, the familiar knot of anxiety tried to form in my stomach, but I forced it down, replacing it with cold, hard resolve. I pulled up to the massive wrought-iron gates of the estate. They were wide open. A large moving truck was parked awkwardly in the circular driveway. As I stepped out of my car, I took a moment to look at the house. It had only been a few years, but the decay was already visible. A meticulously manicured hedge maze was overgrown and wild. The fountain in the center of the driveway, which usually cascaded with crystal-clear water, was dry and filled with dead autumn leaves. My father's prized vintage Porsche was gone, replaced by a battered rented sedan. Two men in dark windbreakers were standing on the grand marble porch. They were private security contractors Alex had hired to accompany the local sheriff's deputy, who was standing by the front door with the clipboard. I walked up the driveway, the crunch of the gravel under my boots sounding like a steady drumbeat. "Miss Harrington?" the deputy asked, glancing at my ID as I approached. "We were just about to knock. They're inside, but they haven't been cooperative." "I'll handle it," I said smoothly. "Just stand by, please." I stepped past him, raised my fist, and knocked on the heavy oak door. The very same door that had been slammed in my face 10 years ago. For a moment there was nothing. Then I heard the sound of heavy footsteps, the turning of the deadbolt, and the door swung open. There stood my mother, Evelyn. She looked a decade older. The stress of the scandals had etched deep, bitter lines into her face. Her usually flawless blonde hair was pulled back in a messy clip, and she was wearing a faded cashmere sweater. She was holding a roll of packing tape. When her eyes landed on me, she froze. The color drained completely from her face. She blinked, as if her mind was refusing to process the visual information in front of her. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice rough and trembling. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice perfectly level. She stared at my tailored coat, the subtle diamond studs in my ears, the sheer, undeniable confidence radiating from me. Then her eyes darted to the sheriff's deputy standing a few feet behind me. A shock instantly morphed into a defensive, venomous scowl. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low. "Have you come to gloat? To kick us while we're down?" "The media has already done enough, Chloe. We don't have the time or the money for whatever petty revenge you're looking for. Get off this property before I call the police." "Not be. You don't need to call the police, Evelyn," I replied, gesturing casually behind me. "They're already here." Before she could respond, my father's voice echoed from the grand foyer. "Evelyn, who is at the door? If it's another reporter from the Tribune, tell them to speak to my lawyers." Richard Harrington rounded the corner carrying a heavy cardboard box. When he saw me standing on the porch, he nearly dropped it. He was a ghost of the Titan he used to be. His posture was slumped, his face pale and lined with exhaustion. The expensive Italian suits had been replaced by baggy khakis and a wrinkled dress shirt. "Chloe," he sputtered. "Richard," I nodded. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, his old arrogance attempting to flare up, though it lacked any real heat. He set the box down heavily on the marble floor. "You have no right to be here. You are not a part of this family. I told you 10 years ago you are dead to us. Leave. Now." "I can't do that," I said, taking a deliberate step over the threshold, wiping my boots on the welcome mat. "You are trespassing," my father shouted, his face turning an unhealthy shade of purple. He looked past me to the deputy. "Officer, arrest this woman. She is trespassing on my property." The deputy didn't move. He just looked at me, waiting for my signal. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out a crisp, folded legal document. "Actually, Richard," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the grand empty foyer, "you're the one trespassing." I held out the document, the finalized deed of sale, stamped with the county clerk's seal. My father refused to touch it, but Evelyn snatched it, scanning the page with growing panic. "What is this?" she demanded. "The deed," I said calmly. "Look at the signature." Her eyes dropped to the bottom. Her breath caught as she read the name once, then again. The tape slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a sharp crack. "Authorized signatory, Chloe Harrington," she whispered. Silence swallowed the room. My father grabbed the paper, his hands trembling as disbelief turned to fear. "Mrs. Fake," he muttered, "you don't have this kind of money." "I sold my company for $120 million, I replied evenly. I bought this house in cash." Vanessa appeared on the staircase, confusion melting into shock as the truth settled in. She asked. "Why?" I glanced around the grand foyer before meeting their eyes. "Because 10 years ago you threw me out of this house like I was nothing." My father's tone shifted instantly, desperation replacing pride. "We're family, Hat," he pleaded. "Everything I did, it made you stronger." A cold laugh escaped me. Succeeded in spite of you, not because of you." Evelyn's composure cracked. "We have nowhere to go," she begged. "You had somewhere," I said. "You just chose not to stand with me." Vanessa stepped forward, tearful and frantic, asking for time. The mercy. I met her gaze, remembering everything. "No," I said quietly. "The sheriff is here to execute the writ of possession," I said, checking my watch. The gold Rolex caught the dim light of the foyer. "You were given 30 days. You squandered them. I am now officially taking possession of my property." "Please," my father whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard him beg. "Just give us until tomorrow. You have exactly 15 minutes, I said, echoing the exact phrase he had used on me a decade ago. "Take whatever fits in your sedan. Leave the rest. The security team will escort you out." I turned my back on them and walked out the front door, stepping past the sheriff's deputy. I walked down the driveway and stood by my car. For 15 minutes I listened to the chaotic, panicked sounds of my family scrambling, the shouting, the crying, the frantic dragging of bags. It didn't bring me joy. Not exactly. It was too sad, too pathetic for joy. But it brought a profound, unshakable sense of peace. The universe had balanced its scales. Exactly 15 minutes later, the front door opened. My father emerged first, carrying 2 trash bags full of clothes. Evelyn followed, clutching a jewelry box, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses as she wept. Vanessa came last, dragging a single designer suitcase, her head bowed in humiliation. They packed their meager belongings into the trunk of the rented sedan. None of them looked at me. They couldn't. The shame was too heavy. My father started the engine. The car sputtered, then slowly rolled down the long, winding driveway. As they passed me, I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, the rightful owner of the estate, watching the ghosts of my past drive out of my life forever. I didn't move into the house. The memories trapped in those walls were too toxic. Instead, 6 months later, I rezoned the property. I had the entire mansion gutted and redesigned. Today, 4100 Crestview Drive is no longer a monument to a corrupt financial tyrant. It is the official headquarters and primary campus for the Aegis Foundation, a fully funded incubator and housing initiative for young women who have been disowned, abused, or financially cut off by their families. Where my father once hoarded stolen wealth, dozens of brilliant, driven young women are now building their own tech startups. Fully funded by my grants, the dining room where I was disowned is now a state-of-the-art server room. The foyer where they laughed at me is a collaborative workspace, and the legacy of the Harrington family. It belongs entirely to me. If my story taught you anything, it's that the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can absolutely build the life you deserve. Has anyone ever underestimated you? Tell me your story in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their worth, and subscribe for more real-life karma stories.